Hello and welcome to our podcast. Thank you everybody for joining us, whether you're watching or listening. My name is Darren and today I have with me Andrews Moses. Andrews and I know each other. We're both at Tenantcube, but I wanted to get him in for our inaugural episode as Andrews has been through the trial and tribulations of being a landlord. He's not only a landlord, he's a founding team member at Freshworks, a longstanding real estate investor, and of course the CEO here at Tenantcube. So Andrews, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem. So Andrews, I know quite a bit about you and you know quite a lot about the real estate space, but our guests probably don't know a whole lot about you at this point, or maybe they don't. But with that in mind, let's just kind of get started by a little bit of an introduction about you and yourself and some of your background and, what led you to become a landlord.
Sure. I came from a tech background. I was with Zoho when I just graduated as an engineer by trade. Got out into working at Zoho, which is a software. Well, I was always into sales, so I was always had that flair for selling. But I got really passionate about real estate because I used to hang out with my family, my uncles, when I was at 8 year old, just hanging out with them, watching them do the deals on buying properties. My family is into real estate, and I've always grown in that real estate environment from my early childhood. So I always wanted to be in real estate. But once I got into software and kind of built that for a few years, when I had the opportunity to become a landlord when I moved to Canada and I had that opportunity, I had to take it. I can't wait before I started on real estate. So I was kind of always waiting to get into it, and I'm happy I'm here, and I'm just enjoying every bit of it.
Well, that's great. And, you had the technology background first. Now, did those items overlap? Like, when did you first become a landlord? Have you been doing it for a number of years now? And what's the experience been like? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your first rental experience after you had an opportunity to get into the rental game.
Absolutely. Great. The first rental opportunity is why we have Tenantcube. The first experience is what led to Tenantcube. So when I got a chance to get into real estate, I had an opportunity to refinance a home and then buy a new home and rent out our existing homes. For anybody new, talking about refinance, we'll do a whole new podcast about it. That's kind of how you build your real estate wealth. Right. So that's kind of, I learned from some of my followers and the guys who I follow, and I did that. And when I rented my first property, I saw this young couple with a baby in the hand walk up to our house, and I'm like, oh, looks great. They were self-employed like I was. I was working for Freshworks, which was right now a publicly trading company. At that point, we were too small. So what I was doing is trying to reinvest the gains that I had from the current house into a new home, so upgrade and then rent it out. When I did that, when I saw them, I kind of understood the feeling of them being self-employed, and I kind of thought that, oh, what a great story. Young couple with a baby in the hand. Looks great tenants. So I shook their hands, took the dollars that they gave me. I should have figured out how a guy could carry $3,500 cash in his hand. But well, I was pretty naive at that time. And then it was great for a few months, and then I got this message from my neighbor who hated me for renting it to a guy like them. He just sent me an article in the news and he said, hey, can you read this? I'm like, what? 3 men arrested in armed robbery in St. Catharines. And we were like, what? And he's like, yeah, that's your tenant. He's in jail, buddy. Like he was arrested for armed robbery. I'm like, oh, shoot. Okay. Now what do I do? So that was the whole experience of, okay, I rented my property. Now I don't have any rights on my property. I show up at the property. My cops have busted the doors. And his girlfriend said, get out of my home. It's like, what? Excuse me? Like all the doors are broken. I can't even walk into my home. She's like, nope, get out of my home right now. I was like, okay. That's what I really realized, that tenants have more rights than me the moment I gave them the keys in the hand. So that kind of all led into do a lot of research enterprise companies didn't care too much because I had 5 units to rent. They wanted 5,000. And given my software background, I said, you know what? Why not build something for myself first? And then I talked to more friends. Everybody had a great story or a horror story like I did. And I said, maybe that's something I want to do. Try to solve problems for small landlords like us. And that kind of led us into this path of trying to build something that could help the small landlords like me, pretty much.
Well, that's great to build something, and not so great to hear about the story. From my perspective, unfortunately, having been with you at Tenantcube for quite some time now, I've heard way too many of these stories myself from a number of different landlords. So you're probably not the first nor the last, and unfortunately, it does happen. But maybe from your poor experience, we can help somebody out in the future. What have you learned with respect to tenant screening, or maybe what to watch for maybe new landlords who are just getting into the game, or even just some existing people who maybe had some issues? What would you recommend, maybe some things to watch for next time you're going to lease out a property?
Yeah, it's a great question. We learn it every day, right? I mean, I'm not an expert. You are not. We're learning it from other landlords who are using our platform. We find tricks and tips and tricks how they use it. But I think overall, one thing I've learned, I mean, if you don't take anything away from this podcast, you want to take one thing: an empty home is better than a bad tenant onboarded onto a home. So what I mean is, I was in a rush to rent the property because I said, I'm going to leave. I got a mortgage coming up. I need to have somebody in the house. I didn't think of, I need to have somebody that fits the criteria and all that. I was in a rush to shake hands and get that person in. So having an empty home might look like it's going to cost you $3,000 a month, but guaranteed, if you have a bad person, it's going to cost you way more than that. Like from my experience, I can say it's at least 5x more than having a home empty for 2 months while I do my screening well and find the right tenant, right? So absolutely. So have an empty home, that's fine.
So the piece of advice is, do not rush it. If you haven't found somebody qualified to meet your standards and somebody you're comfortable with, it's better to be safe as opposed to sorry. Hold off 1 more month, let it sit vacant so that you can have a long-lasting good relationship with your next tenant, if that's correct.
Absolutely. So that's the first learning. The second one that I've learned is trust everybody, but please verify their story. Like I've done this mistake a couple of times. The first one was a horror, but some of them were small mistakes. But one thing, if you really want to do it, is like, it's nice to trust people. It's great. There are amazing people out there, but please do verify. So now, you know, the way we rent it is you get a story, you double check that, and then you run credit checks or whatever you need to. However you verify that, it's up to you, right? But make sure you take that time to verify it, because real estate investment, it looks so passive, but if you give it to a wrong person, man, your life's going to be horrible. So just verify.
Yeah, well, that's some great advice. I mean, we definitely want to help people avoid making the same mistake that you had, and hopefully we can do that. And, you know, that's one of the goals of this podcast moving forward, is to make sure that we can help new landlords and the everyday investor. One item, though, you know, you'd mentioned that you'd gone through this experience, and that led you to take Tenantcube. So you'd kind of been moving through the motions and finally decided, okay, I'm going to help other people who had the same experience that I did. Can you tell me a little bit about, you know, what those initial days and getting started were like, and, you know, some of the progresses and processes that you've been through, kind of leading the charge at Tenantcube and trying to make a better experience for landlords?
Yeah. When we started, I think I started off with an idea, right? If I can help one landlord like me, like it could be a friend or somebody, or just myself, can I make it easy on myself? Was kind of the path we took. And when I met my co-founder, who is technical, like even though I'm an engineer by trade, I hated coding. So I know I never wanted to get into coding. I wanted to get out of technology. Even though the company that I work for is publicly trading, I wanted to get out of technology. But when I found this opportunity, there was definitely an urge to say, you know what, can we do this? Like, if there are tenants out there who are taking landlords for a ride, can I help 5 of them a year, maybe 10 of them a year, right? So that's kind of what led me to think about, is it really worth it? And once we have people like you guys kind of understand the vision, and my co-founder who joined me, and he said, you know what, we can build it. Like, you have the idea, we have the technical expertise, we can go build it. And we did a lot of research on the market, and we thought, you know what, it is doable. Obviously, you want to make sure you make some money. You don't want to build something and then say, oh, nobody wants to pay for it, which obviously happens as well. But then COVID hit, and then one thing happened was one of the best things that kind of led us to really aggressively pursue this was one of our landlords that we have talked to in the past. When we had the idea with the pitch deck and went to them, and he was like, I would never do online rentals. I will never collect money online. Like, no, screw it. I'll only do checks. I like to collect the money in cash. I like to meet the tenant every month. And boom, COVID hit. 2 months later, he calls me back and says, hey, you talked to me about some online payment. None of the tenants are showing up to pay my rent, buddy. Can I use that system? We're like, you told us not to build it. We still have plans, but we're not built it yet. Right? So we were like, oh, okay. So 3 months later, even though COVID was devastating, we had to build a team remotely. But we knew that it accelerated the real estate market and the landlords' thinking by 10 years in the span of 6 months. Now, people who never wanted to do online rental payments want to do it today. Right. People who want to list their properties online and remotely screen people want to do it today. Right? So that's kind of the positives out of it, because always, as somebody who's looking at the positive side, you want to look at what's the opportunity in it. Right? Like, even though COVID was hard, we started the company during COVID hit, and then we had to go back to set up a team remote, try to figure out, put the pieces together, try to build an ecosystem around our system. And obviously, we were able to, we've been lucky to have a bunch of landlords and property managers who have kind of partnered with us and investing with us to kind of help us get to where we are today. And now that sitting here today makes us as a team feel great when we get those emails from landlords that saying, oh, wow, this is amazing. This is great. And the best feedback I always like is when people go through our system and they say, oh, you guys have thought about everything. Like, I've not thought about everything. I've been through every pain point. I've lived it. So that's why we just built a solution. So it's not just somebody thinking, oh, I'm going to build something and make money. It's just that, how can I solve the problem I had in my first rental? How can I solve the problem when I had the third rental? How can I solve the problem as 5 rentals together? How can I solve it? So it's all putting all those 1, 2 small problems together and building something. It's been a good and enjoyable ride, but there's always been a lot of negatives as you know, you've been through with us. You've seen all the ups and downs of building, finding new people and all that. But I think overall, it's been an amazing experience given the results we are seeing today.
Yeah, that's excellent. And yeah, having been through here COVID, I think we've seen all kinds of different ups and downs that have come along with that. And I know people are probably tired of hearing COVID at this point, but now that's in the rear view for most of us. We are now kind of transferring into another area, which is higher interest rates. So now with the highest interest rates coming through, this now seems to be the key conversation piece for a lot of landlords. What recommendations, if any, do you have for landlords who are maybe feeling a little bit more of a pinch, or maybe a little bit concerned about how some of these kind of new realities may impact their rental operations, especially for some of the smaller operators who maybe haven't been through some of this? What can they do to help keep a steady peace of mind?
I'm not a financial advisor or anything, but I think overall, one thing I can tell is, based on my experience, is that as long as you keep things simple and keep it all efficient as much as you can, so you can spend that extra time on doing other stuff that makes you feel good or either makes you rich, you have that time to put that effort and time to build something that you really want to do. So keep it as much as efficient as possible so that you're not spending hours and hours of time. I think you talk about inflation and interest rate, but your time is also valuable, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're spending 20 hours, 30 hours dealing with tenants every month, you could have put that either spend more time with their family or maybe make money somewhere else. So just be efficient and then kind of make sure that you're not spending too much time on unnecessary tasks and kind of try to automate as much as you can and get into a autopilot mode. And that's why we talk about making sure you have the right tenant in the first place. Always falls. If you do that while you take your time, do that right. Most likely, who cares if the interest rate goes up a little bit, as long as the tenant's paying you on time,
right?
And you're able to cover your mortgage, you're still able to live. And now that the interest rates are going up, you have two defaulting tenants, you got two mortgages to pay at a higher rate. Well, good luck then, right? So it's always goes back to keep it simple, look at efficiency, and kind of spend time where it's important.
So it sounds to me like your premise is pretty straightforward. You can save yourself a lot of problems just by making sure that you do a good selection in the beginning. A lot of that's going to come down to appropriate screening, of course. And, I appreciate some of that more in-depth answers for the last couple of questions. I think that helps paint a good picture for maybe some of the people who aren't familiar with Tenantcube or yourself yet. But maybe for some of those people who may be listening who are familiar with Tenantcube and who have listened to me before, who have spoken with you, they maybe have a good idea of where we've been and what we've done. What can they expect for the future? What's your vision for Tenantcube for the future?
It's a tough question to answer, but I think overall, only thing we look at is how can we make things easy. Like we talked about efficiency, we talked about being a good screening process and whatnot. We're just trying to find areas where we want Tenantcube to become the most trusted kind of platform that it's for both sides. It's not just for landlords, right? Mm-hmm. As you know, we're not just building it for landlords. Our name is Tenantcube because we know tenants are the core for a rental business. Mm-hmm. If the tenants don't rent your property, you don't have a business. So let's think of how can we become a trusted source for both landlords and tenants so that if you're a great landlord and a great tenant, this is the platform you want to be. We want to be more efficient, and everything you need to do as a landlord is available to you easily from any device. If you're a tenant, you have a trustworthy landlord who's going to take care of you. If you want everything, the entire rental journey and that experience should happen within our platform. And that's our goal, right? So we want to be the one-stop shop, whether you want to run a credit check, for example. We got that integration. It takes us time to build it. But then why do we do all that? Because we know it's useful for our landlords, right? Same thing with tenants. How can they find the right property? How can they apply? How can they spend less time applying to 200 different properties? So that's kind of where we want to be, a single platform that's trusted by landlords and tenants across North America.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And, with us sitting here and talking about it and you having been through your experiences and us dealing with landlords every day, we hear it all. And one thing that often comes up is you can never be fully sure, right? And we hear that all the time. And I think that's part of the reason why we've recently introduced the rent guarantee. What advantages do you think something like a rent guarantee is going to bring to people? And maybe if you can explain also what a rent guarantee is for the new landlord, the people who may go through all the screening steps, but still are not sleeping easy at night. What can something like a rent guarantee help for, outside of that software perspective, but really in the more peace of mind style services?
Yeah, absolutely. I think rent guarantee is simple, right? So we protect the interest of the landlord. So all that we do is, let's say, if you're renting a property and if you're not sure, rent is guaranteed for up to 12 months or $60,000. If there's any malicious damages, covered up to $10,000. So it's simple, like you clearly said, peace of mind. Right. That's all we provide with that service, right? Mm-hmm. And we have partnered with the right people who can actually provide that. So something like a COVID happens and your tenant's not paying you, but you're still getting paid. Mm-hmm. So that's the beauty of something like that. And obviously Tenantcube cannot do that. We need to partner with the right people who have the right resources to be able to provide that peace of mind for our landlord. And that's what we do. Mm-hmm. We are a platform where we look at all the different problems and see, how can I solve this for our landlords? A rent guarantee program helps you sleep at ease, knowing that you have 3 mortgages to cover. Just take my example, 5 houses, 5 mortgages.
Right.
So if one tenant does not pay, I can't pay the mortgage unless I've saved so much money up front, right? Now, how can I save? Something like COVID happened, 6 months you're out of rent. If someone can pay that rent for you, it's rent is obviously a mortgage, which is the biggest expense for you, right? So that's why it helps you sleep with a lot of confidence, thinking that, you know what, anything happens, there's somebody who has our back, right? Like we can do the best screening, because tenants, it depends on the situation, right? You have an amazing tenant, let's say, for example, husband and a wife lose their job in the same month. Rent is their biggest expense. Obviously, they're going to default on it. Like, it's not that one tenant's bad, the other one's great. It's just that situation changes for people. Something like COVID hits, both of them are laid off. What do we do then? So that's where you need the peace of mind of having something like a rent guarantee that just protects both sides, and you are able to pay your mortgage, and just life goes on.
Right. So kind of to help provide some sort of netting for those unpredictable events like a COVID, or on an individual level, even a job loss, those things that we may have not necessarily been prepared for in the past, but we know we need to prepare for now. Well, that's all super helpful, and I want to thank you for your time today, and just kind of giving everybody a quick refresh and an introduction for the new people. Again, this is going to be our new podcast series, so we're going to have lots of other great guests like Andrew's on here. And if you haven't already, go check out Andrew's. You can find him on Twitter. You can find him on LinkedIn, some great quality posts, and you'll catch him on other people's podcasts and shows as well, where he'll be providing other pieces of information which will help you with your investing efforts. So again, thank you so much, Andrews. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and check us out on our next episode.
Thanks, Darren. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone.